How do we look at that? I mean, these are the people most affected sometimes in inner cities. Sometimes it's the poor. Are you focused on that as well?
Oh, you're spot on. Absolutely spot on. So think of it this way. Who are the communities most often terrorized by violent crime and gangs? Lower income, racially diverse immigrant populations. And I say this about education. Who's most negatively impacted by not having opportunities in education? Lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations. We conservatives are the ones that are the cavalry. We're the ones that are keeping people safe. We're the ones that are providing opportunity for jobs and success and opportunity in America. We should be proud of that. We should be touting this from the rooftop. And yes, again, it is these communities that aren't enforcing the law. Simply enforce the laws that are passed. Send a message to criminals. If you engage in criminal activity, we're going to stop you. You're not doing it in our state.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Hey, thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential. You know, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal is often seen as the starting point of the modern administrative state. This part of the federal government, which falls under the executive branch, holds significant control over many aspects of public and private life. As the administrative state has grown over the decades with its regulatory powers, it's led to concerns about government overreach and the infringement on states' rights and individual freedoms. Now, in response to this overreach, states have filed lawsuits to challenge the constitutionality of the federal government's authority. Georgia's Attorney General is one of the AGs that's pushing back on the administrative state and its overreach because of the impact it has on the people of Georgia. He's a graduate from the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business and Lumpkin School of Law. He was the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. He served 6 years as the chief of staff for a U.S. senator, and he served on Georgia's Judicial Nominating Commission. He was also appointed Attorney General in 2016 and then elected in 2018, and he has focused on protecting the lives and livelihood of the people of Georgia. I want to welcome Georgia's Attorney General, Chris Carr, to the podcast. All right, Mr. Attorney General, wish I could be there with you in person, but I'm at home recovering from knee surgery, but it's sure great to have you with us.
Jeff, great to be with you too, and I just hope you heal quickly.
Well, everything seems to be going well. I appreciate it. Hey, listen, I wanted to talk with you because you've been involved with so many other states suing the Biden administration. And I think that's really important in a system of federalism. And let's talk about why it is so important to be involved with these lawsuits.
Yeah, Jeff, I appreciate it. And I pulled out my little card because there's so many different lawsuits over so many different areas of government and society that we've ended up suing. I'll tell you the reason that it's important, and you're about to go to Congress, and I spent time as the chief of staff to one of our U.S. senators for about 8 years. Or I was with him for about 8 years. As Congress gets less and less done, nature abhors a vacuum. And that vacuum gets filled by the federal executive, no matter which party you're in. But right now, we have a group of activists in the Biden-Harris administration that literally wake up every day finding and do things that allow us to sue them based on a number of issues, including just unconstitutional overreach. But if Congress doesn't push back, or Congress doesn't act as that first among equals, and the federal executive starts issuing executive orders and regulations, then in our federal system, the states push back. And we attorneys general are in the best position to push back in our states as the chief legal officer. So, my Republican colleagues and I are proud to say that we are the last line of defense against, radical liberal policies. And we're proud of that. But let me just, Jeff, it's okay. Let me just give you a list of some of the lawsuits that we filed recently. Title IX, we won. Title IX, we won. Student loan bailout, we won. Waters of the U.S., we won. SEC climate change disclosure rule, we won. Prayer in school, public meetings, Second Amendment, immigration, including ending catch and release, and also keeping the Remain in Mexico policy in place, unionizing farm workers and mandated wage increases. We have a lawsuit based on Georgia's Election Integrity Act that combined elements that both parties wanted, the Biden-Harris administration suing us to this day. And then energy independence issues, power plant rules. So, like I said, it's all across the spectrum of government, the economy, and society. And we're going to keep doing it. I'm proud that we're doing it.
Well, it is such an important part. And you talked about some of the great victories that have been had there. You talked about Article 1 and, Congress and legislative branch really ceding some of their authority, not really wanting to grab that back. Now, that's not a problem with the executive branch, right? The executive branch seems to go out and grab all the power they possibly can. We just had a recent Supreme Court decision in the Loper-Bright decision that struck down Chevron doctrine. How important is that in your mind, that decision? And then what is the legislative branch? What does Congress, what does state legislatures need to do in order to gain back some of that Article 1 authority?
Well, I think number one, as to the end of the Chevron doctrine, that is a win for the rule of law. I've never understood why the judiciary would give away a key function of the judicial powers. And that's their interpretation of the law, not an executive branch agency at the federal level. So I think that rights a rule of law wrong. And it's going to be interesting to see where we go. I don't think it's going to end litigation. I think there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to go back and say, hey, we now need you to go look at this decision that you had years ago, and let's make that align with your ability to interpret the law. As it relates to Congress, boy, I sure wish that that the legislative branch would get back to work and assume some of that authority. That's fine to work hand in hand when your party's in power in the White House. I get that. But Congress is the first among equals. There's so many issues that need to be addressed. If we can't come to if certain bills are bad, like the immigration bill, vote it down. We'll get back to work and let's figure out a way to come up with solutions. Because right now we've got an open border. We have fentanyl coming across, human trafficking, gangs, you name it. Everybody's paying more at the grocery store. The world is a lot less safe. We've got criminal activity going on around the country, particularly in blue states and blue cities. There's a lot we need to do, and there's a lot Congress could do. And I would just encourage those of you that are going to be in Congress, take that seriously, grab the reins. It's the right thing for the American people.
Well, let's go back to the lawsuits a little bit. There's several states sign on to these lawsuits. Kind of explain how that works. How does a lawsuit work when you got multiple states involved? Do you all have to work together and the AG's offices in these states?
We do. That's a great question. Most of us also now have Solicitor General's units. Those units do two things. They coordinate all the appeals for our offices, and then they also are dealing a lot more with the federal issues. So, yes, you are working together with other offices all the time. Different offices have different size SG units that have the ability to file more lawsuits. But, boy, there's some real intellectual firepower in these Solicitor General's units. And the way that we kind of look at them is, all right, is this an issue that impacts, for my sake, does it impact Georgia? Does it impact the 11th Circuit, which we're in? Or is it an issue just of national concern that we need to be a part of, going back to that principle that, we can't let the federal government overreach. It's one thing if you pass a regulation or promulgate a rule within the confines of the statutory structure, but so often the executive branch are run by activists. And so it ends up being a political exercise. And no better example of that than the student loan bailout. I mean, it was legally, we've won twice in court, unconstitutional. It's not legal. It's bad policy. But think about this, Jeff, from just a fairness standpoint. Why should an electrician or a long distance truck driver or, the wait staff at the Waffle House pay the student loans of a lawyer and a doctor? That's crazy.
Right.
But because it was all political in nature, plain and simple. And that's what you get in the federal executive branch when you have political appointees.
Yeah. And these lawsuits are, as I said, so important. They're not only a federalism issue here, right? States' rights versus the role of the federal government, but as we talked about, that executive branch trying to grab more power, these lawsuits push back on that. They use our judicial system to basically hold the executive power in line and say, no, that you just exceeded your authority. That's really an important weapon when we're in federalism, and it's really an important weapon within the Constitution, right? Between the separate but equal branches.
That's right. And I think going back to our premise that the Congress and the legislative branch is supposed to be the first among equals, you have seen certainly, if not power shift, maybe importance shifting now to the judiciary, at least at a volume and in a way that we probably don't want. I mean, again, we want our elected officials to go debate the issues of the day, pass legislation dealing with those issues, and we want that limited role for the judiciary. But thank heaven we have some very good textualist and originalist judges out there. Fortunately, during the Trump years, we got some great judges, and thank heaven we have those judges, particularly with the importance. But again, at the end of the day, as a believer, somebody that did spend time in Washington, that does work with our legislature, that is where the focus should be, and I hope we get back to it.
Well, and it seems like many of our judges and certainly our Supreme Court justices, several of them are sort of begging Congress to get back involved and saying, look, you guys need to write this, that you need to tell us what you want, and we're looking to you to do that. And as you talked about, these textualists.
That's right. And again, when I talked a little bit about the issues of the day. I mean, anything that's interstate commerce in nature, national security in nature, immigration, again, the paramount duty of the federal government is to defend the nation. That's number one. Immigration is a part of that. It's right there in the federal Constitution. It is the role that Congress is going to have to play. When you start seeing it from, again, primarily we're seeing it again in the state of Georgia from a public safety perspective with fentanyl and gangs and human trafficking coming across the border. If the federal government doesn't do it, yes, we will. We will do everything we can to protect the people of our state, but we need Congress to get back to work. Look at issues like AI, cybersecurity. We're doing more online. Those are real issues that, are impacting business. They're impacting elections. They're impacting national security. You name it. And really need Congress to get in there and roll up their sleeves and pass some good legislation. All
right. Now, one of the lawsuits that is being adjudicated right now is over the new federal rule limiting emissions from coal burning and gas-fired power plants.
Right.
What makes this case different from the West Virginia versus EPA case?
Well, I'll tell you, it's almost what's similar. And what's similar is the Biden administration or the Biden-Harris administration, like the Obama administration, they want to do away with coal-fired power plants. They want to do away with natural gas facilities. And look, you got to have this mix. And what concerns me is the federal government plays a role in this and the states do too. So again, as we push back in the Obama years and the Obama era regulations, we won. Because what was happening is, the federal government was always declining the state's role and usurping everything. Well, here we are back. And this is quite simply a way to shut down coal-fired power plants, and that's going to have a big impact on it. One, again, we think it's illegal, and two, it's going to have a huge impact on our economies and the people in our states.
How do you think we talked about Chevron being overturned, with it being overturned, do you think suing the federal government is going to slow down or is it going to speed up?
No, I think it's going to speed up, at least in the short term, because I think either there's some decisions that were made in the past that people will want to revisit. But again, I go back, I sound like a broken record, but if Congress doesn't do certain things, or even if they do, I still think you're going to have this temptation in the federal executive to overreach. And I think that you're just going to continue to see litigation, which does show, again, the importance of having good conservative judges on the bench. But, I can't say that I see a slowing down anytime soon.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about crime. Obviously, something very important to the American people. And as they head into this election season, they talk about that crime and the importance of that as an issue. You've worked under two different governors who kind of handled crime very differently. Why are both of the different styles that each governor had, why do you think both of those styles are needed?
Yeah, both Governor Deal and Governor Kemp have been spot on because their approach has just simply, Jeff, been the other side of the same coin. I think Governor Nathan Deal really did a great job of articulating the issue. He said, look, we've got to separate those that we're mad at from those that we're scared of. And we got to get help for those we're mad at so that we can deal with those that we're scared of. So in Georgia, for example, we established a lot of accountability courts. So people that had addiction issues were getting the help that they needed. We have family treatment courts. We have drug courts, DUI courts, mental health issues. We have veterans courts, really trying to provide help for, lower level offenders, nonviolent offenders that truly need help. Well, then that means you're going to have a lot of violent criminals in your correction system, and that's kind of where we've been. And so I've been, again, appreciate the approach that both of them take because they're both critically important. What we focused on over the last 8 years, and Governor Kemp came in 2018, he said, look, we're going to keep people safe no matter where they are. We don't care your race, your gender, sexual orientation, where you live, or where you're from. We believe in Georgia, everybody deserves to be safe. So the state got jurisdiction over domestic terrorism in the state in 2017, human trafficking in 29, criminal street gangs in 22, and now organized retail crime. And if you look at those issues, those are really the issues that overlay multiple jurisdictions in the state. I'm very respectful of our constitutionally separate sheriffs and DAs in Georgia. That's how we do it. But we're really the force multiplier as you're dealing with issues from a judicial economy standpoint, from a violent crime standpoint, where we're going after individuals and making sure that we're keeping people safe. And Jeff, I also see it as an economic development issue. Nobody locates a business or expands a customer base or goes somewhere, for a great football game or bowl game or whatever it may be if folks don't feel safe. So I really think that's the focus that we've done in the state of Georgia, and I'm really proud of that.
Well, and, Chris, I think in a lot of the bigger cities, right, that's where the crime rate really needs to be reduced. That's who has really borne the burden of crime over the years. And so how do we look at that? I mean, these are the people most affected sometimes in inner cities. Sometimes it's the poor. Are you focused on that as well?
Oh, you're spot on. Absolutely spot on. So think of it this way. Who are the communities most often terrorized by violent crime and gangs? Lower income, racially diverse immigrant populations. Who are the communities that are most vulnerable to human trafficking? Lower income, racially diverse immigrant populations. When the CVS or the Walgreens or the racetrack or QT or Home Depot closes, who are the communities most often impacted? Lower income, racially diverse immigrant populations. Jeff, as I've said, it's we conservatives, and I say this about education. Who's most negatively impacted by not having opportunities in education? Lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations. We conservatives are the ones that are the cavalry. We're the ones that are keeping people safe. We're the ones that are providing opportunity for jobs and success and opportunity in America. We should be proud of that. We should be touting this from the rooftop. And yes, again, it is these communities that aren't enforcing the law. Simply enforce the laws that are passed. Send a message to criminals. If you engage in criminal activity, we're going to stop you. You're not doing it in our state. Enforcing the law is the simplest way to stop crime.
Well, talking about education, let's talk about that for a second, because you talked about people in inner cities. Those are the people who over the last, 100 years have been locked into a system where they had to go to the school district that was, basically their zip code determined what school they had to go to. Obviously, America is making, particularly since COVID, making great strides in education savings accounts and free market reforms in education. First of all, love to hear about what Georgia is doing in that regard, number one. And two, what role does the Attorney General play in that battle?
Now, Georgia, our legislature and governor just signed a bill into law that's going to provide more choice in education. We were just talking about it at the program here. It is going to give, particularly at those that are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, an opportunity for choice in education. Jeff, I think we need to load the buffet up best possible, whatever works best for children and for parents. If it's public school, I want public school to be the best option for that particular group. Private school, homeschool, charter school, magnet school, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, philosophically, how cruel is it to not provide opportunities in education? How cruel is it if you have parents and children that want to have an opportunity to have a different educational opportunity, that we're preventing that. Not just not encouraging it, but preventing it. So again, there's states that are doing a lot. Florida's done a lot. Arizona's done a good bit, and Alabama and others. And I'm proud that we're in that game as well. We got to continue to move forward. As the Attorney General, continue to support those that are actually passing the legislation that we have, standing up for folks like that, and with the bully pulpit. Because again, as Governor Deal used to always say too, at the end of the day, the goal should be a job. The goal of education is to get a person a job at the end of the day. And once you have a job, you have less need for government involvement, and that includes in the criminal justice system. So education is key. I think that it's irrespective of what your title is. Education should be a focus for all of us and giving opportunities to parents and kids.
All right. Well, Mr. Attorney General, thank you for joining us. I appreciate all the great work you're doing. And as you said, I think the state attorneys general are really soldiers in the battle for federalism and making sure that this runaway federal government doesn't get too far away from us. And you are really one of the leaders in that. So we really appreciate you taking your time, but also just being a warrior on those issues.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be able to do it. And like I said, we're proud to be the last line of defense. We'll keep doing it. And I hope you heal quickly.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chris.
Take care.
Well, it's great having Attorney General Chris Carr joining us for this episode. He truly is one of the great attorney generals. We've had the West Virginia Attorney General Morrissey was on this show several months ago. And again, we talked then about West Virginia versus EPA case and talked about a little bit about that today, as well as so many other cases where federalism is decided sometimes in these cases back and forth in the courts, in the federal court system. And Chris Carr has been really a warrior on that. And again, he's not just fighting for the people of Georgia. He's fighting for every American when he files these lawsuits, fighting for federalism, fighting for states' rights, and of course, fighting against the overreach of the administrative state when these sorts of things happen. So it's wonderful to have people like him be able to join us on the podcast, be able to share their ideas with you. I appreciate you joining us. Remember, go out there and fight for liberty and freedom, just like Attorney General Carr does. Liberty and freedom, they're easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there, fight and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.